Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Eggs. Today's special guest is Ryan Hanley. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Thrilled to death that you were able to make the time, and glad to have you here.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Why don't you give us a quick overview of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I have a very interesting career. One of my mentors refers to me as, and this is going to sound self-aggrandizing, I don't mean it to be. I don't actually wear it as a badge of honor. It's almost the opposite. But he refers to me as like a phoenix. I've had this very interesting entrepreneurial career where I've made the mistake of working for other people quite a few times, and entrepreneurs and large bureaucratic organizations don't do well. So I fell into the insurance industry about 18 years ago, and this may sound crazy, but it is not every little boy's dream or girl's dream, I'm imagining, though I'm not one, to be part of the insurance industry. So it was really how I got in it was the dowry for my ex-wife's hand in marriage, essentially. Her father owned an independent insurance agency, like many of you listening to this have probably driven by 1,000 times. You see them all over Main Street America, everywhere in the U.S. And when I asked for her hand in marriage, he essentially made me a quid pro quo of like, I essentially think he didn't want his little girl to be married to a bum. So he said, why don't you come sell insurance for me? And at the time, I kind of had a dead-end job. I was working for American Express in Manhattan, and it was just like something out of Office Space. And I said, sure, this sounds like a good challenge. I've never sold before, so sounds like a good career. I did that for 8 years, kind of hit a ceiling in like the 15-person family-owned agency, just from a personality perspective. Parlayed that into a chief marketing officer role for a national insurance technology company, which I built a media company out of that. We went from 0 to 500,000 eyeballs in less than 4 years. We put on a couple conferences. We had a podcast network that was doing over 50,000 downloads a month, et cetera. And over disagreements over who would be on stage at the third iteration of the conference, I was fired summarily, again, not understanding how bureaucracies work. I became the chief marketing officer for another insurance technology company, was there for about a year. That just wasn't a great fit. Thought maybe I wasn't meant for the insurance industry, and became the CEO of a fitness franchise in which I thought I had hit the jackpot. You basically show up in athletic gear every day, and part of your job is like working out with noon with the members. And I drive around we had 7 locations at the time, and I was like, this is amazing. Like, I'm around fit young people who are energized. We're building something, we're growing something. And unfortunately, I learned the lesson of growing something too fast that you don't own. So we went from 2,100 members to 3,000 members in less than 9 months. We were the most talked about brand in our market out of any brands that existed. We were the most talked about. We owned kind of share of voice in that market. We were absolutely blowing up, at which point I had made the business so profitable for the founder that he decided he wanted to return, and I was his biggest expense. So I was sitting at a table at 8:30 in the morning on a Monday for our standard kind of, CEO founder meeting, just kind of updating on what we were going to do on the week. And I knew I was in trouble when I saw him walk in a suit with his attorney, and he pushed a piece of paper across the table and said, "You did a great job, but we don't need you anymore." And that's when I decided I have worked for other people for long enough. I then I went back into the insurance industry and founded my own insurance agency called Rogue Risk. We pioneered a model in the industry called the human optimized model, which we can talk about if you're interested in. And we were born 7 days before COVID. I launched the agency March 9th of 2020. 7 days later, the governor of New York, which was the only state that we were licensed in at the time, shut down New York State. And I thought we were DOA. And it was through just all the experience that I had with inbound marketing and YouTube marketing. And we kind of, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Marcus Sheridan's, like, they ask you answer philosophy, but, kind of took that and applied that methodology. And by April of 2022, we had built a business that was so fast growing that we were actually acquired, which I'm fairly proud of, that growth and what we were able to do in such a short period of time in the insurance industry during COVID, et cetera. And then just as recently as a month ago, my earnout period came to an end, and I'm kind of in that transition phase to the next phase of my career. But I've had a fairly dynamic journey, and both as an executive, as an entrepreneur, and happy to answer any questions that come out of that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Thank you so much for breaking all that down. I mean, obviously you covered a lot of ground there, so there's a lot to talk about. First thing I guess I want to try and get some clarity on or around is like, I mean, how did you prepare for a career like this? It seems like you sort of jumped around a little bit. I mean, were you educated in any of these things? Like, did you go to school for finance or any of that kind of stuff? Or are you just full on entrepreneur?
So, if I have any natural skills, it is either I'm too stupid to stop or I'm too stubborn to stop, depending on who you talk to. They'll give you maybe a different perspective on that. But really, it is, I have been blessed with a intrinsic desire to continue to learn, and I have hardcore ADHD. So I apply those two aspects of my personality, and whatever I'm involved in, I just dig into 100%. And I'm able, and I just push really hard. I mean, I refer to myself and really this is all self-reflection. This isn't like I knew this going into this last 18-year journey of my life. This is kind of looking back and going like, why does this keep happening? Where are the mistakes that I made? I'm always trying to get better. I am, and I think maybe many of your listeners can relate to this. I'm a wartime general. You do not bring me in when things are good and you're just trying to have nice incremental growth and, make everyone happy. That's not how I operate. I succeed in situations in which you need to grow. You don't understand how to grow. You don't know why you've stagnated, why you've plateaued. You need to move into a new market. You need to build out a new business unit. Like, these are the areas where I have the most success and where I've shown time and time again that I can be successful. The problem with that is that does not play well with inside of organizations that culturally are just looking for harmony, right? Which today, most large organizations would choose harmony over growth. That's my general opinion. And I've experienced this firsthand. And I think it's why being an entrepreneur, why being an innovator, why pushing, working hard, and being kind of, I hate this term, but I'm going to use it because it's just, I think people understand it, this idea of being a disruptor. Why I think this is so important if you feel that drive inside you, because there is a tremendous amount of opportunity right now. From a societal perspective, mediocrity is what we're pushing for. We want mediocrity. We want everyone to be the same. We want everyone to talk the same, to look the same, to act the same, because God forbid someone moves the cart in one direction or another that we're not prepared for, or et cetera, or someone's offended. And for all those reasons, let those large organizations play those games, because there are so many cracks being formed in every industry because of those, that desire to not necessarily be successful, but just not to get in trouble, that forms all kinds of cracks. And inside of there, we can either create bespoke solutions, we can create new brands, we can create new, we can target different mindsets, different mentalities, et cetera, and find all kinds of amazing opportunity.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it seems your point about mediocrity is well taken. And I think that there's sort of a cultural pressure to behave that way, right? I mean, this is something that Mike and I talk a lot about on this show, which is, what are the steps one needs to take to become an entrepreneur, right? And we think that a lot of times people will substitute education or some online course or whatever it is and kind of put it in the way of doing the work, so that they can kind of feel like they're doing something about the work without actually taking the risk of doing the job, right? Yeah. And so, in our mind, we've boiled this down to being kind of a fear issue, right? We have a problem putting one step in front of the other. And, and so we've seen a lot of people address this through mentorship or through, actually taking a job or working through something, so they can sort of get those first steps. But it seems like you have the right personality to just take those first steps, even if it's wrong. And so I wonder if we could dive a little bit more into just sort of that personality or that mindset and see if there's anything, that could be passed on or could be, relayed to a listener, for example, in terms of, giving one the boldness or helping them develop the skills to be able to just do the thing in their head and not spend so much time worrying about, either being mediocre or trying to fit a mold or whatever it is that's holding us back.
Yeah.
Well,
So go ahead, Mark. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, I kind of see you as the all-around sales guy. Like you're whether it's insurance, whether it's the fitness center, whether it's you have that kind of, you're outspoken, you have the charisma of, like if you're going to come into something, you're going to make wakes and you're going to do whatever it takes to kind of take it from A to B. And that I see it a lot in people that we've talked to in the past is like sales mentality. Like, I'm going to go and talk to him. I'm going to go talk to her. I'm going to see what I can, a mover and a shaker kind of person. Would you say you kind of relate to that? Is that kind of your roots?
So the truth is, how I got into, so my expertise really came from digital and content marketing and is now expanded significantly from there. But that was a major course correct. I was a terrible salesman, horrible. When they first gave me the insurance job, it would cause me physical pain to pick up the phone and call someone. Like literally, I would reach for the phone in my hand, and I don't know if there's video, but like my hand would literally shake as I was reaching for the phone. I was so terrified to call someone and interrupt them. And it was only through pure necessity. Like literally, my father-in-law called me into his office 18 months into that job. I'm 26 years old at the time ish, and fired me. Literally said, "This is not working out. You got to go." And I did what any self-respecting young man would do at that time. I literally got down on my knees and I begged him to let me stay at that job because I did not want to go home and tell his little girl that I'd just been fired by her father. And he, he thankfully agreed, but he said something's got to change. Like you can't continue to have these results. And that was when I realized I had to figure out what was it that separated me from everyone else. I'm not the best cold caller. I'm not the best networker. Frankly, I'm not particularly good with people, but what I am good at is taking complex ideas and boiling them down into very understandable real language. And in the insurance industry, that was superpower. Like, insurance is so convoluted and so complex and so you read the documents, and even if you know what you're reading, they're insane sometimes, right? But I had this ability and desire to, and I kind of coined this phrase back in 2010 inside the insurance industry. We're no longer the gatekeepers of insurance information. I was sharing with my brothers and sisters in arms in the industry that for so long, in order to get the information about, like, say insurance was something that you needed information about, be it your personal or your business, like, you had to come see me. You had to come to my office. You had to meet me face to face. You had to ask me questions, and then I would give you information. And I flipped that on its head. So what I did, and I'm at the time was not very good at naming things, so don't hold me to this. I called it the 100 Insurance Questions Answered in 100 Days video series. So what I did was I collected in 2011, December 2011, I collected 147 questions. Every one of my customers who walked in, I said, if you could just have one insurance question answered, what would it be? No questions too small, too large, silly, stupid, doesn't exist. Just what would it be? Collected 147 questions. I dialed them down to 100. And starting on January 2nd of 2012, I answered those questions every day, 2 minutes or less, and put them on YouTube. Now, this is back when HD wasn't a thing, and it took 37 minutes to upload a 2-minute video to YouTube based on what broadband was. So I'm doing this and educating and putting these videos online and answering questions online that had quite literally never been answered in the entire world before in a digital format. Like, you couldn't go online and find the answers to these questions, let alone in everyday language. And and my phone started ringing off the hook. It changed the whole course of my career in so many different ways. That was a turning point for me where I said, everyone is so scared about what people are going to think, what they're going to think. People were ridiculing me. They're just going to watch your videos and go work with someone else, and they're going to steal your information and bop, 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 and all this nonsense. And I knew that that's not how human beings work, right? Human beings are drawn to those who add value to their lives, right? I may be working with someone else, but man, if you just give me value, you're just willing to openly give me value in my life. In this case, inside knowledge boiled down into real language about a product that they have to have, in this case, insurance. Like, people just started picking up the phone and calling me. And my phone was ringing off the hook. There were so many leads coming in that I literally had to give leads to my brother-in-law at the time, which if you knew the dynamic between us, that I would much rather have been just kicked in the than give leads to my brother-in-law. And I had to. There was too many of them. So that opened my eyes to this idea of being an educator, a value creator. And that's really what I am. I mean, yes, can I sell today? Sure. But that's a learned skill over time. But what I believe is that you give without expectation of reciprocation, and the universe provides. And I don't mean that to sound so ethereal. I honestly believe that that's how the universe works. You don't know when you're going to get it. You don't know exactly how you're going to get it. But if you give, you are going to give. You are going to get back. And that has been the story of my career over and over and over and over again. Oh, and to answer your question about entrepreneurs, I think most people are not meant to be entrepreneurs. I think that unfortunately there's an entire generation of, we'll call them influencers, selling entrepreneur porn to people just so they'll buy coursework that should never be entrepreneurs. They don't have the wherewithal for it. You have to be willing to be punched in the friggin' face over and over and over again, have people ridicule you, have people leave your life, have friends not want to talk to you, have spouses not understand you, to be tired and bleary-eyed, pounding bourbon to keep yourself sane in the middle of the night to get things done. And if you're not willing to do that, doesn't mean your life is going to come to that. But if you're not willing to do that, you should not be an entrepreneur. Go get a really exciting job. And Gary Vee says this all the time. Facebook needs, Chamath Palihapitiya was the number 7 at Facebook. The number 7, right? Like, go be the number 6 at some amazing company, or the number 2, or the best salesperson at an incredible company. Like, I do not think the world needs entrepreneurs, but if you're going to care what other people think, then you are not meant to be an entrepreneur. If you are going to let your spouse tell you that you can't go on some trip to some conference that you need to go to, you are not ready to be an entrepreneur. Like, you have to give up things to be an entrepreneur. It's just the way that it is. And I know everyone's like, work-life balance, Ryan, and the internet, and da-da. That's bullshit if you're going to be an entrepreneur. It is. It absolutely is. Now, you can make money. You can have a little thing. But like, if you really want to push and be that big thing that you have in your mind, you have to be able to give something up. You're not going to be at every one of your kids' sporting events. You're not going to be the most attentive spouse and make dinner every single night when your spouse comes home, right? Like, you're not going to be the best friend to all your buddies. You're not going to be able to go skiing all the time. Like, you're going to have to give things up and not care what other people think. I've lost friends. I'm divorced. I'm not saying these things are great. I'm not like not wearing these as a badge of honor, but I don't know how else to be. And you just have to accept that if you're going to push hard and do things that matter, there is no, I'm going to do this and be balanced. It just doesn't work that way. It does not work. Go be an entrepreneur, go be great in another organization, go support someone else's dream. You can still be incredibly fulfilled, incredibly satisfied. Maybe that thing is just a cool hobby you do on the side, or it's a side hustle. But like, there's just so many people that are, like you said, that are like fearful of what people are going to think. So they're not moving forward and they buy another course. It's like, there's a good chance you're just not meant to be an entrepreneur. That's why you continue to do it. You're not willing to give up the 5 beers on a Friday night with your friends. Sorry. It's just the way that it is.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. And I think Mike was starting to get into this a little bit, but there's a parallel, I think, between the entrepreneurial life and sort of what you were describing too, in just having to give of yourself incessantly until eventually you get, right? And that being sort of just the way the universe works, right? Because I think that the two paths are sort of the same, right? The entrepreneur, generally speaking, does give.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they might get the big upside at the end, if something works out. But if nothing works out, they also have given and got nothing for it. And so, I mean, it's interesting just that you went from the one point to the next point and how parallel they are. It's kind of an interesting observation that I don't think I've seen before, or I haven't really put in that frame before. I think, also you mentioned, the concept of having to give value, before you get, and I think that too runs a parallel with entrepreneurship, right? I mean, if you're not giving value, really, what are you doing in business, right? I mean, there's not, you're not truly running a business or being an entrepreneur if you're not providing value to somebody. And so whether it's content creation, marketing, or just the brass tacks of running your welding shop, if you're not providing value, then you're dead in the water 100%. Anyway. So I
Yeah,
think it's really interesting that those two things are actually kind of the same.
I posted this little thought on Instagram that was basically, and I have a way that I can't help. I don't know if it's because I'm my Irish descent or my East Coast mentality or the fact that I was born in the woods, but I basically said hard work is bullshit. You either add value or you don't. And that, and I think that I don't have the problem with hustle porn that other people do, because I honestly believe you have to be willing to kill yourself. It doesn't mean you're going to have to be pulled 3-day shifts to get the job done. You have to be willing to do the work. It doesn't mean it's going to, you play the game as the game unfolds in front of you. So you may not have to pull 16-hour days, but my point is you have to be willing to do it. So I'm not against hustle porn and that kind of stuff, but there is no value created in hard work. And it is a common misconception that I see early entrepreneurs make is they're like, I'm working hard. And I'm like, okay, are you creating value? Hard work is an amplifier of value creation, but in and of itself has zero value. I could sit here and bang on my keyboards and do all kinds of hard work for days, create zero value and make zero money. So we have to figure out, how do we add value? You just talked about it, right? What is the value you provide? What is that thing? And then as an amplifier, as an engine, as a catalyst, hard work takes that value and pushes it out at scale. But without the value, if we don't understand what value we bring to the market, if we don't understand why someone purchases our thing, right, then all the hard work in the world means nothing. It literally means nothing. Hard work is zero value. It is a catalyst. It's the accelerant on the fire. It's not the fire itself. And I think that's the common miss on hard work that people have. And when they're like, oh,
I think that's true.
I'm grinding, and nothing's happening. It's like, well, how do you add value? Well, I got an idea. Ideas aren't value. What do you do that someone will pay money for? What's that thing? Is it, hey, we have this amazing audience that people can buy sponsorships to through this podcast, right? Your value is access to awesome. There's your value. That's what people will pay for, right? So it's like, that's the kind of thing that I think a lot of people miss on, is some of these just little nuances where at the end of the day, the value of your company is not how cool the thing is. It's whether or not people will buy it. Otherwise, you're an artist, which again is cool unless someone doesn't buy your art, and then you're still homeless,
Yeah, no, that's true. And you see that especially a lot in tradespeople, who've basically taken a skill and have tried to turn that into a business, for example. I've got some family that work in the HVAC business, and, they always have. It's always been the family line of work. But you see them killing themselves for next to nothing, right? And they are providing value. I mean, they're heating and cooling your home.
Yep.
But at the same time, it's not being done in a way that's very scalable, right? And it's being done at the cost of hard work or at the cost of their body. So while they're creating value, it's not really amplifiable in the same way that, maybe a tech company or something could be.
And then that comes back to,
I would say that.
Sorry, go ahead, Mike. Sorry.
Okay, go ahead, Mike.
I would say that in HVAC or plumbing or any of the trades businesses, it might be hard work. It might be something that you have to get your hands dirty for, but there aren't very many people out there willing to get their hands dirty for it. And because of that, you can charge a premium these days. And if you get a good team,
and you might be right too, especially with an eye towards the future, right? I mean, it's actually funny because I kind of joke with the boys. I'm like, if you don't know what you want to do, go learn plumbing.
Yeah.
I was like, go figure out how to be a plumber and then teach other people how to plumb. And you will never,
when your toilet's clogged at 2 a.m. and, there's nothing you can do about it because you've never been a plumber before, you're going to pay premium dollar to have some guy come out and stop the leak or stop the,
and there's a shortage of those things, right? I mean, I was going to make this point earlier, but social media has made entrepreneurship seem wildly accessible. So it seems like something everybody's doing and everybody should be doing, right? Like, look how glamorous it is. Look at all the cool stuff I get to do on Instagram. And so, but I think that that's led to a lot of people moving into sort of softer trades, going to school and learning, business or whatever it is they're doing instead of going into the trades. And, we're going to run into a real crisis if we're not already at some level of crisis where, you're going to run out of these handy folks. and those will become even a higher premium.
Yeah, I don't want to poo-poo college, but I think we have to have real conversations.
Oh, we have a history of poo-poo college in here.
You do? Okay.
Hey, this is a safe place for poo-pooing.
Yeah,
I think that we have to be very clear on why we're going, right? If you're an athlete and you're getting to go for free, amazing. Or you're getting a scholarship and there's a reason you're going, great. You got to be a doctor, sure, lawyer, okay, engineer, probably. You're going to go for business, that's a stupid idea. I honestly think a business degree, an economics degree, I have 2 books over here that you could read and you're going to everything you need to know to run a business. I mean, I've now been a 4-time executive, 2-time founder with a successful exit. Like, you don't need more than what you can read in a basic book that you can get for $7 on Amazon in economics, right? There's just these, unless you're going to work at Goldman Sachs, these economic theories don't mean anything. And really, that's just a big, kind of circle jerk anyways. And they're just all glad handing each other and pushing the money around in circles so they all make it. It's not like you're actually applying economic theory. I mean, half these guys don't even, you ever listen to a macroeconomist? They don't know what the fuck they're talking about. It's like a voodoo doll or whatever. Like, they're rolling one of those dice that comes up with the wacky messages in it. They don't know what they're talking about. So, like, my point in saying all that is, I think the trades are an incredible place to be. And I actually have been talking to my kids about it, and just saying, like, guys, these businesses, one, there's incredible opportunity because most of the guys that are doing the trades today are in one of 2 camps that I'm seeing. I'm seeing younger guys who are business guys that know the work and then find experts that come in and they amplify and scale. Or I see old school guys that know the work better than anything, aren't incredible at business, and they're creating opportunity for these others to come in. So I think, one, we do not want to lose this expertise in general because we need it. 2, I agree with Mike. This is a place where you could charge incredible premiums on your work. I mean, I just recently bought a house and kind of gutted it and redoing it. And some of the work I've been able to do myself, but some of the things like the plumbing, like the electricity, like the HVAC, I need to hire someone to come in and do those things. Like, what am I going to do? I'm going to learn how to become an HVAC expert, to redo this house. It's not going to happen. I don't want my house to burn down and I want it to be warm. So, I think there's opportunity, and we need to remove the idea that an entrepreneur is either an influencer or a tech CEO. Like, I consider myself an entrepreneur. I started an insurance agency, and, I always say this to my buddies who are kind of in the tech space. I'm like, you talk about like lifestyle businesses. Owning an independent insurance agency is the original lifestyle business. Like, the economics on a property casualty insurance agency are insane. I mean, there literally aren't better economics that exist, I believe, in the world than this model. When you see these guys and they got the pants that don't fit and the shirt that's untucked in the back, and they got maybe, some jacket that they bought 17 years ago, which you don't realize is their house in Florida is probably 7,000 square feet with a yacht attached to it, and their wife's driving the brand new 7 Series. Like, you know what I mean? Like, these guys make bank. And it's not because they're swindling people. It's not because whatever. It's just the economics and the way that industry is set up is incredible. So, like, most people don't think about that, though. Kids are coming up and they want to be tech CEOs. And I'm like, you have like a 1 in 1,000 chance of becoming a successful tech CEO. But with a little bit of hard work, you have like a 1 in 3 chance of becoming a highly successful insurance agency owner. And, and then apply that to all these other industries that we mentioned, a lot of the trades, a lot of these other professional classes that they're there for the taking. We just have to realign this entrepreneurial conversation away from umbrellas and drinks sitting on a beach running a course or a tech company or an app, and just say, look, that's one way to do it, but it is far from the only way to do it. And I'm so excited for what entrepreneurship can be, but the conversation has to expand. And I believe, as I stated before, I think it has to become a little more real.
Yeah, well, and to Mike's point, I mean, so few people are willing to get their hands dirty these days, right? Everybody's looking for kind of an easier way, and I think that provides a lot of opportunity for people who are willing to go do the work.
Yes,
whether that's physical work in the HVAC lane, or if it's the mental work of learning the insurance industry. I mean, it's still something that isn't glamorized in social media, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're not seeing the insurance agent, tech, Instagram channel, that people are all jacked about, oh, this is our favorite insurance agent. Like you're not seeing a lot of that.
There's
outside
no
of maybe
insurance
the State Farm
celebrities.
guy.
I can tell you that firsthand.
So I want to go back a little bit and talk a little bit, and maybe there's not much to uncover here, but I want to play with it a little bit. This idea of sort of that moment where you were told by your father-in-law that you were being fired, and you were basically then pushed to have to do something. So this is sort of in the same vein of some of the things we've been talking about, which is this, conquering fear or learning to be better than we are, or uncovering our own, whatever it is, and you sort of described from there that you had, uncovered the fact that you were an educator and that you really knew how to articulate this insurance information in a way that was digestible. But like, certainly that wasn't, you didn't get, slapped by your father-in-law and then wake up and go, oh, okay, it's YouTube. That's what it is. Yeah. Like, but there was certainly an opportunity. And I see this in my own career, like as a young guy, I was running a little design agency out of Pocatello, Idaho. And at some point I went to work for a real agency because I'd never been inside one. And so, but when I started that job at the agency, I remember clearly just having kind of this conversation with myself that like, this is my opportunity to go out there, have a voice, have an opinion, really try and make something out of this opportunity. Right. And I'm generally pretty mild mannered and soft spoken and kind of keep to myself. And, I'm a little introverted that way. And so when I was put in this situation, I really had to make a conscious decision that, I'm going to work really hard at opening my mouth and giving opinions. And all that did was pour fuel on my career. Like I ended up skyrocketing to the top of that agency within a year or two. I was, very well respected. And even though I got laid off, which happens a lot in the agency business, we're still like, I'm still one of their top freelancers now 10 years later. Like, I mean, we still do incredible amounts of work for their agency at all kinds of levels. And, and so, but all that reputation and all that stuff was built on this singular moment, which was, in my case, it wasn't a firing, but it was, I had to look at myself and say, okay, I've got to really make something of this or it's not going to happen. Right. Or it's just going to be nothing. And so, and in your case, your father-in-law basically gave you an ultimatum, said, hey, look, this is it. It's not working out. So you were then put in a situation where you had to pivot. You had to figure out how to solve what's next and how do you rise and overcome the shaky hands on the sales call, or how do you, whatever it is, whatever occasion you needed to rise to. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about just your mindset in that period. And it might be a little challenging because, I mean, obviously you've come a long way since then. But if you can go back and look at sort of old you and think about how you made this transition to gain the confidence that you did to do the things that you've done, decision-making process in terms of, hey, this is the path forward, and basically achieving to the point that probably went well beyond what was thought of as your capability at the time.
Yeah. So in order to answer that question properly, I have to go back just a little farther in my life for some context. Outside of being a 6'4" white guy, there's never been a group that I really fit into. I was born in a tiny little town of 900 people that, people said, hey, you could leave your doors open in that town because the criminals didn't steal from there. They live there. It was lower class was a stretch in terms of economics. I've divorced parents who've been to jail, alcoholism, drug use all throughout high school, whatever. Like I've never been able to succeed playing the game everyone else plays, playing the game the way everyone's plays. I've just never been able to fit into a group and move up through a hierarchy in like the best practices way. It's just never been the case for me. Whether it was sports, whether it was, school, high school, college, it's just never been the way. I've never had that friend who could get me the job. And it's just, I've always had to find alternative paths to wedge my way into the places that I wanted to be. So my brain, to a certain extent, is wired to say, what are the best practices? Okay, now I know how to beat everyone else. I'm going to find another way to do it. So what I did was I literally, and I won't say that I like went to the report and read the insurance best practices report, although because there is one, I was just aware at that time of what the best practices were. Like I knew you take 1,000 business cards and you drive around, you drop them off and you go to networking events and you cold call and you ask your friends, and that's what everyone did. And I said, okay, how am I going to be successful doing it the same way as everyone else in a timeline that matters? I can't. How do you stand out? Like, how do I stand out if I'm doing it the exact same way that everyone is doing it? I know what the best practices are. I know what every agency within a 50-mile radius of my agency, I know exactly what they're doing every single day. What are they not doing? None of them were doing anything online. None of them were using Facebook. None of them were using content marketing, which was just kind of becoming a term at that time. And I said, screw it. If they're all going to do it this way, I'm going to do it this way. And I got thrashed. And what I mean by that is my father-in-law, my brother-in-law, my wife who also worked at the agency, my wife's sister, all my friends in the industry in general. I mean, literally, there are articles written in trade journals about how I personally am wrecking the industry by teaching people about content marketing. You can go back and find them. They're Insurance Journal, Property Casualty 360 magazine. Like people were so offended by the fact that I would take this different path and share information first as a way to build trust, respect, and attention to me, and then have them call me that they thought the belief was I was wrecking the industry. My point in saying all that is I didn't give what anyone else thought about me. I just didn't care. I was going to do whatever I had to do to be successful. Not in a nefarious way, obviously. I mean, I'm a God-fearing person. I just, in a way that I had to get it done. And I could not see a path doing things the traditional way that was going to yield results in a time frame that I could abide. So I said, I'm going to do it a different way. So that's how I got to content marketing. That's how I got to doing the YouTube videos. That's how I got to, being a pioneer in the insurance industry with Facebook marketing and with LinkedIn marketing and all these different things that I've done over the course of my career. It is because I've literally read the best practices and said, I now know how to beat you because I know exactly what you're doing. This is what you're doing. You're gatekeeping all the information. You're forcing people to drive. I was one of the first people, I was certainly the first person in my agency, and we were one of the first agencies in the capital region, which is what they call the greater Albany, New York area, to use e-signature, to use text message to communicate with people. I mean, these things today are like, duh. And even at the time in other industries, they were best practices, but they were not in the insurance industry. And I was using them strictly because they weren't, because it immediately made me different than everybody else. And I was willing to take all the arrows, all the criticism that came with it in exchange for building my own success, helping my clients, doing what was right by them, and starting to create a new model that I believed was the future of the industry, which ultimately I was able to put into practice with my own agency, 6 years later with Rogue Risk.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. So our agency does a lot of work for insurance companies. So we're serving like Aetna and Cigna and United Health and a lot of these big insurance companies.
The health space.
So and I can tell you just as you're telling these stories, like I can think about the evolution. I always point out the evolution because we do a lot of work in Medicare, and so I can always point out the evolution of Medicare because when I first started in Medicare, which was probably pretty close to the same time frame as you're talking about, this would have been 2011-ish, 2010, something like that. The Medicare marketing consisted of a happy little old woman in her walker, right? And she had a big smile on her face and she was just feeling great. And the modern day version of that is dude running out to the beach, out to the beach with the surfboard over his head. And so it's the same marketing, same Medicare, same everything, but the people have changed a lot, right? And so to your point about evolution, I mean, there was a period of time there where, I actually went out and I spent 4 months in Aetna's office working directly with the CEO because they were going through this transitionary period where they were moving from sort of a direct mail world to a digital marketing world, right? And they brought in this guy, his name's David Edelman. He's he was their CMO, but he was the former CEO of Digitas and all these big digital marketing companies. They brought in a guy that was the CEO of the Caesars Group down in Vegas, and he was running the company as a CEO. And that combination of dudes were really pushing Aetna to, their whole boundaries as far as the way they marketed to seniors. And so it's interesting to hear you talking about these things too, because I can clearly visualize the time before, the SMS marketing. And even in our case, I mean, we were just converting things from printed documents into digital documents, right? It was a big digital transformation. So, but it is interesting how quickly that transitioned. So, but for people like you, at the agency or the brokerage level, who were doing this, like totally unheard of at the time. And so it is really interesting, hearing sort of the way that it worked for you, because it is funny how in other industries, very commonplace, a lot of these different marketing techniques, but in insurance specifically, and there are plenty of other kind of old industries that move slow like that. But in insurance specifically, just because I have expertise in there, it was wild how far behind the curve they were on stuff.
Yeah, there's two main like we'll call them strategies, because they're probably not exactly tactics, that I've used to be successful time and time again in multiple industries. And it is see what everyone is doing in other industries that are not being done in yours and apply them. People will think you're a genius. You're literally just stealing. It's amazing. And then the other one is take a look at and I explained this one, take a look at the best practices and do something that's not being done in best practices. Because remember, best practices are past looking. For those listening at home, when we hang our hat on best practices, they're all based on what happened in the past. Best practices are not based on what's happening in the future, right? They're all like, John Smith's marketing agency or Tammy Johnson's insurance agency or whatever business, right? Cleo's plumbing, they're all based on what they did last year or the year before or the last 5 years to be successful. That doesn't mean that's what's going to be successful the next year, right? Like I built Rogue Risk digitally native. You know what the biggest challenge of 2020 was for the insurance industry? How employees could operate inside the business, because none of them had the ability to work remote. Literally, agencies went out of business because they didn't have remote capabilities, right? And for us, not just because, I'm 42 years old. Like, I'm not necessarily like this 28-year-old or 32-year-old kid who's like digitally native. Like, I'm in that generation where I remember what it was like to not have a cell phone. So, going digitally native from the beginning was looking into the future saying, I want to be able to hire the best anywhere in the country. Like, so why would I set up an office? Why would I buy a single piece of hardware that isn't based in the cloud a single piece of software that's not based in the cloud? Like, none of that makes sense to me because of where I wanted to go. I didn't know COVID was coming. You know what I mean? None of us did, obviously. But I think some people did, but that's a different story in a different podcast. I think that this idea of thinking of it's nice to know what the best practices are, but I honestly believe best practice studies are a guidebook for how to win, not by following the best practices necessarily, but by finding the gaps in the best practices and exploiting them, because most people are unoriginal. Most people mimic or follow. So they're looking at best practices going, why aren't we doing this? And we need to do this. And that's all great. Except they have big, huge blind spots in their business because they're simply following best practices. So those two strategies have worked over and over and over again for me. And, again, they're high level strategies. There's a lot of tactics that fit underneath and nuance, et cetera. But they're really good places to start if you find yourself plateaued.
Yeah, no, I like that. Well, and it's interesting because one of our clients is a company that goes around and basically acquires insurance brokerages, at the rate of 1 to 2 a day. And, so during COVID, so they were scooping up a lot of those companies that were failing right in COVID, right? Because basically, it just had to do with antiquated systems. They just didn't have a way to remote log into a computer or whatever.
Yeah.
And, it seems so crazy, but that was the industry, right? That was the way that, even small brokerages dealing with large companies, like the software that bridged that gap was so antiquated that they weren't able to do that. So this company comes in and, buys up all these brokerages and that's basically their business model is they just buy these small brokerages, and they had the software and the infrastructure to support these companies through COVID. Right. So the acquisitions made a lot of sense for them. Yeah. And so, it's just it is funny kind of in retrospect looking back at that, because it seems like such a dumb reason to go out of business, but it's like, but that was, the thing in insurance, especially.
And I just want to put a pin in that particular point, right? The reason that they were not prepared is because they would thump the table and go, I do business eyeball to eyeball. We respect our clients. We do business in person. We're local. So they built it on this ego-driven ideology from 40 years ago, right? And never adopted. And if they were looking at their business and not looking at past performance, I was able to be successful operating eyeball to eyeball. If they were looking future, right, they would have said, yeah, we were really successful that way, but geez, what if I get this great employee who's 4 hours away? What if, you know what I mean? They were thinking past performance. And this for the entrepreneurs out there who are listening to this show, whether you're in the plumbing business, the insurance business, or whatever, right? I think that entrepreneurs tend to look a little forward, but a really good place to find your defining characteristic that separates you as an entrepreneur, it is often wedged between two best practices.
Yeah, I love that. Well, it's funny. I think it's like banking disclaimer copy, but there's this saying, that past performance is not indicative of future performance. And so, but that kind of sums up the thing, right? I mean, it's like looking at the past is not an indicator of what's to come. Yep. And, it might help, but, in the case of our insurance industry that we were just talking about, not being forward looking was a problem. Not to say, in their defense, they may not have foreseen COVID, but at the same time, they could have foreseen that people were doing more transactions online. Mm-hmm. And there was plenty of logic or, reasoning to go ahead and start creating an online presence.
For sure.
Anyway. So they probably could have done that, but I'll give them a benefit on the doubt or benefit of the doubt because nobody really knew what was coming. So can we get into just one more topic real quick before we get out of here? I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about, you mentioned at the top that you're kind of in a transitionary period, starting into, it sounds like sort of a consultancy practice. Mm-hmm. I wonder if you'd talk a little bit about just sort of maybe the entrepreneurial aspects of starting a consultancy and moving into that kind of business after basically what is, sort of a storied business career. Yeah. And now you're going to try and take that knowledge and make it available to other people by way of consultancy. So I wonder if you talk a little bit about just sort of your next journey and what that's starting to look like.
Yeah. So I am positive just because of my nature that this will not be the only or last thing that I do, but we had really figured something out in our agency. And for a whole bunch of reasons, I do not want the expertise to die inside that agency. Because now that the earn-out period is over, they're kind of like dissolving the entity and rolling the book into like a larger book, and it's not really going to be its own thing anymore. So I want to take some of these things, some of them are very tactical, some of them are strategic, et cetera, and apply that and basically allow the rest of the industry to learn what we had known. And again, this is not just from the last few years of entrepreneurial experience. This is the last 18 years. So we developed what I call a one call close process. And this works regardless of what industry you're in or what you're selling. And that process, we were able to take new reps from a 40% conversion ratio on qualified inbound leads and bump that up to 80% close ratio inside of 3 months with our highest converting rep at around 89%. And that process, we're just, the first iteration of the consultancy is basically taking that inbound process and teaching it first to the insurance industry and then expanding out to other places that are interested. There are other things that I have in the works in addition to that. But, that's probably the first thing we're going to do. When it comes to an inbound sales flow, if you're looking for someone to teach you cold calling, I'm not your guy. I know how to do it. I can do it, but there are better instructors on that. However, when it comes to closing inbound business, which is wholly different than referrals, business that comes from ads, business that comes from outbound cold calling, cold email, people who raise their hand through content marketing and contact your organization, there is a very specific way, and we've kind of refined this through thousands and thousands of leads, tens of thousands of leads. I think we did 12,000 leads or something like that. There's just a very specific way to talk to them and get them through, get them closed, and keep them happy. And the first iteration of that consultancy, which is finding the name of the agency or consulting agency, is going to be Finding Peak LLC, or Finding Peak, like Finding Peak Performance. But that's kind of what I'm up to first.
It's great. Ryan, we're kind of at that time. You want to tell people where they can reach out and how they can get in touch with you?
Yeah. So if you want to find me, I'm ryanhanley.com. That's probably the best place. You can search Ryan Hanley on any of the socials. Probably my most active social media is LinkedIn and Instagram. Post a lot of stuff around peak performance in business, life, health, etc. If you thought these viewpoints are strong or were offended by them, then don't follow me on social media. But if you like my way, then do. And otherwise, happy to help anybody. Always happy to answer questions. I love this stuff, obviously. And I just appreciate the time, fellas. This has been great.
Yeah,
absolutely, man. Thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in this week and every week. And we'll see you guys next time.